everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Book Readers Talks. Today we have with us a bright, young law student and author, Tanmay Kulkarni. Let us talk to him and understand his love for reading. Hi, Tanmay.
How are you?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here. I mean, I'm very excited to talk about the books that I've been reading. It's going to be very fun.
Oh, that is really great to know. So, I've introduced you already that you're a law student and you also love reading. But tell us more about yourself first.
So the three things that I talk about myself the mostly is basically I'm a law student, I'm an author, and I am a lover of cinema. Those three things kind
Oh,
of, make up most of my life. Um, like when
mhm,
I'm not at home, I'm usually at college, which kind of
oh,
takes most of my time. Now the vacations are going on, so it's fairly chill.
mhm,
And reading, yeah, I love reading. The thing is, I started
mhm.
reading quite a while ago, and then I had
Okay.
many breaks in between it. But now, because of certain groups that I'm a part of, certain communities that I'm a part of, they
Mhm.
kind of push me to, read more and more. And it's amazing. I love the world of fiction, and I love stories. It's one of the highlights of my life. And of
Mhm.
course, I'm a lover of cinema. Movies also make up like one third of my life. I love watching great movies. I love recommending people movies. So yeah, that is that about me really.
Mhm. Oh, that is great. And you have a lovely background, Tanmay.
Oh, thank you so much.
Tell us about it.
Right. So, a new novel by me. It's a
Mhm.
fantasy thriller that will be coming
Mhm.
out at the end of this year, probably in
Okay.
November or December. So
Mhm.
all of them are like characters and different gods and all sort of stuff because it's a fantasy novel. So you gotta
Mhm.
have supernatural beings in it. So yeah, I mean those are all the character posters that I've made, and it kind of
Mhm.
keeps me motivated, keeps me inspired to keep on writing because writing such a big book, it's a heavy
Mhm.
task.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. That is a wonderful thing. I mean, the posters are also nice. And I think you're creating a universe, kind of.
Uh,
So let me start by asking you about for your love for reading. So when did it all begin?
it, I mean, I guess I started writing before I really began reading. I
Mhm.
started writing back in like eighth standard. I just took like two superheroes and made like a story out of them. But my reading really
Mhm.
started, I guess, in ninth standard. So
Mhm.
in camp where I live nearby, there's a bookstall,
Mhm.
a famous bookstall that my sister used to take books from. So while we were
Mhm.
passing by, she was just browsing books, and to be honest, I didn't have any interest in reading back then in ninth standard.
Mhm.
And then she was like,
Okay.
you should really start reading. It's a great way to learn things to see new stories and all. And then I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
sure. Like how much can it really get? Then she got me my first year book, which was Harry Potter, the Philosopher's Stone. I'm sure many readers started their journey of reading
Yes.
with like, Harry Potter, and I am. So, and as time went by, I think like in like 2 months, I finished all the seven books. And then I was
Oh.
like, this is fairly nice. I would like to read something more darker, something more, scarier. I was
Mhm.
already into it and I wanted to explore new genres. Like fantasy is nice, but I want to see
Mhm.
what other sort of fields can bring.
Mhm.
And then I picked up it. Like it's a famous book by Stephen King with Pennywise the Clown. And it's
Okay.
it's a long book. I think it's like a 1400, 1500 page book, and I
Uh-huh.
finished that in 3 months because it's a very long book and it was very scary. But it's a great book, and that is how I started. And after that, it took me about like a year to
Mhm.
kind of get back into reading again because I read like very heavy books, and then after
Mhm.
that I just lost interest, and then I gained an interest again. From the same
Okay.
stall, I picked up The Night Circus, and
Mhm.
after that, I really have not stopped. I've just been reading continuously. Like at like minimum, I remember like my worst year in reading was like after that phase was probably just like 8 books. Like that was my worst. Otherwise, I've been reading like north of 9, 10 books every year.
Oh, that's amazing. So, by the way, can you name this bookstall that you are mentioning
Yes,
in camp?
so it's opposite SGS Mall in Camp. It's called the Solanki Cellars.
Oh, okay. I think it is on that footpath.
Yes, yes, it is on the footpath. He has gotten very
Yes.
famous. Like Earlier he used to be just like a random road seller, but now he has like big authors coming and selling their books there. It's very impressive.
You're right. Yes, it's quite famous. Thank you for sharing. So, what kind of genres of books do you like to read, Tanmay?
So recently I've been into contemporary fiction and fantasy fiction. I really
Mhm,
like sort of, reading two contrasting books at the same time.
mhm,
Earlier, I was reading Agatha Christie's book called Appointment with Death. I finished that last week. And with that, I was
mhm.
reading Neil Gaiman's The Sandman World's End.
Oh,
So
okay.
these two, I guess fantasy, dark fantasy, I would say is my favorite genre currently. Dark fantasy and
I see.
contemporary fiction. So
Mhm,
by Frederick Backman, which kind of explore the nuances of life. Frederick Backman is one of my favorite contemporary authors. He
mhm.
writes
Okay.
stories that are set in the real world, and with like all of
Mhm,
its nuances and all of its the just the simple mundaneness of life, and he kind of brings out the beauty in it and the sadness in it. You at the
mhm.
beginning you kind of think, oh, this is a fairly nice happy book, and at the end you are just destroyed in the inside. It's, yeah.
Oh, yes, right. So, what role do books play in your life? Like entertainment, information, knowledge, like that?
Mm, I mean, calling books and entertainment would be like many people have told me that they kind of consume not just books, right? Art in general, like cinema, dancing, singing,
Mhm,
books, reading, everything just as sort of entertainment. I think it's sort of like a really downgrade to what art is. I think art is a huge
okay.
part of life. Art
Mhm,
defines cultures, art defines what people are, what sort of places that you are from. That is
mhm,
what it really is. Books have been a huge part of my life early on. I think currently,
mhm,
like writing has just, kept me going through and
mhm,
reading as well. Because the thing is, reading gives you a lot of inspiration. It gives you a lot of new information about the things that you have
mhm.
probably would have no idea. Sometimes I read something and I'm like, I could add this into my own book. I mean, obviously not through plagiarism, but like as an
Right. Right.
inspiration. I love this concept and I would like to
Mhm.
talk about it so much. And yeah,
Mhm.
books have just been like an unimaginable part of my life. They add so much joy, they add so much sadness. Like I guess I just choose my own sadness by reading books like books by Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and all
Oh,
these classic old authors. So
yes,
yeah.
yes, right. By the way, you also mentioned a few communities that you are a part of, which suggest books or they inspire you to read. So, can you name a few?
Yeah, of course. Reads, which
Mhm,
happens in Pune at Kamla Nehru Park, is one of them where we just, come and silently read in the park. That is one of them. The
mhm.
Saturday Book Community, which I am a co-founder of, along with two other
Oh,
people, Aditya and Prathamesh. So
mhm,
yeah, we host sort of book clubs every month, and
mhm.
we let people discuss the things that they really like. We don't really focus on one singular book. We focus on like a theme or an aspect of some book that they really like, and then recommendations just keep on going. And if you really like something, you can dive deep into it.
Okay, that's nice. So, which author have you chosen today to talk about?
So I've chosen Neil Gaiman to talk about. Neil Gaiman
Mhm.
is my favorite author of all time. Previously used
Okay.
to be Frederick Backman, because
Mhm.
a lot of books that I read earlier on, like Man Called Ove and My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologies, a lot of other things, like really
Mhm.
simple writing, but it makes so much sense when you think about it, and it's so sad. It's brilliant. But why Neil Gaiman is because he's a master of stories. I don't think
Mhm.
anyone can tell a better story than him. He is an
Mhm.
amazing writer. Sometimes I just, like when I read a story by him and I finish it, I just sort
Mhm.
of sit in awe for a bit. Like what did I just read? How can even like a living human being just think of something like that? It's unbelievable.
Okay, Neil Gaiman it is. Can you tell us about the author a little bit?
So Neil Gaiman, he mainly writes fantasy fiction,
Mhm.
fantasy or dark fantasy fiction. One of his most famous works is called The Sandman, and
Mhm.
it's a graphic novel series. It consists of like 13 books, and there are other spin-offs of it as well. I am currently
Okay,
reading the Sandman series. I just finished the eighth book like day before yesterday, and I want to talk so much about it.
please do.
um
Yes, sure.
yes. So here we are. So I
Uh,
have the book with me. It has a really nice cover, so I want to show it. This is it. It's called
oh.
The World's End.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes.
Nice.
So this is the eighth book in the series. I recently finished the eighth book now, as I've said it. To really talk about this book, I need to give a lot of context to what happens because it's fairly far
Sure.
out in the main series.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole Sandman series is really about a family, like a very weird kind of family. You've got the seven members who are
Mm-hmm.
like concepts of life personified into gods.
Oh, okay.
The main character that we
Mm-hmm.
follow throughout the series is called Morpheus. He's the god of dreams.
Okay.
He does not only represent the dreams that we have while we're sleeping, but also the dreams that we, like our ambitions and the things that
Mm-hmm.
we aspire to be. So that is the main character, Morpheus, and he has siblings. So Morpheus
Okay.
is sort of like the middle child in the family. You've got the most elder person in the family is Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Destiny is like an elder brother. He roams in his own garden, which is sort of like a maze. And every
Mm-hmm.
path that he takes, he changes some person's destiny with it. So
Oh, okay.
he's represented as a person who is just always wearing a hood. His face is never seen, and he has the book
Mm-hmm.
of destiny, which is sort of like handcuffed to his hand. So he can never really, leave his responsibility of being the
Okay.
most elder person there.
Mm-hmm.
Then, as we go down from him, you got death. Death
Mm-hmm.
is like the representation of the concept of death. She is Dream's elder sister, and she's sort of the closest to Dream. Earlier in the series, in the first book, there's this beautiful chapter where
Mm-hmm.
Dream and Death sort of go around and they carry people's soul into the afterworld, into the afterlife, whether it is heaven or hell.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just like the sweetest person ever. You would always think of Death, like especially in Indian mythology, on Yamraj is considered to be like this very heavy sort of a being who kind of forces people out of their lives and into the afterworld. But
Mm-hmm.
here death is sort of represented in like a really different way where we haven't really seen this sort of representation of death. So yeah, that's you talking about death. And then there is destruction. Destruction is
Mm-hmm.
another concept personified. He sort of gave away his responsibility of destruction. So what happens
Mm-hmm.
earlier in the series, destruction
Mm-hmm.
is a part of the family. But
Okay.
then, as nuclear bombs and as sort of weapons of mass destruction, they kind of come in the way. Destruction realizes that humans kind of make their own destruction.
Mm-hmm.
He isn't really, needed anymore. What is his point in existing?
Mm-hmm.
So by book seven, he kind of leaves the family, he kind of leaves Earth, and he retires just as a normal person. He starts painting, he starts farming, he has his dog with him, and he's just chilling. In book seven of the series, Dream,
Mm-hmm.
and his
Mm-hmm.
youngest sister, which is Delirium, she
Mm-hmm.
used to be Delight. But then,
Okay.
whenever Delight happens too much and for too long, it turns into delirium, it turns into madness. That is how it is personified. It's brilliant. I could have never thought of it.
Right.
So, Delirium wants to go and find destruction because she misses him. He was a really good elder brother, and she somehow convinces Dream to go along this journey with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then they find destruction, but then destruction is like I've given up everything. I serve no purpose in society anymore. I am just waiting for like death to come get me and just take me away. But he is also living a fairly nice life on like an island which is far away from everything, far away from Earth, in a different astral plane. And then you have the two twins. You have Despair and you have Desire.
Oh, okay.
Desire is considered sort of the evil person in the family
Okay.
because they always want to take away whatever humans have or whatever any of the family members have because
Mhm.
desire says that things are usually never fulfilled.
Right.
And despair is the other twin. She is literally sadness. She lives in her own realm, which is like just reflection, like it's just filled with mirrors, and there are a lot of
Mhm.
reflections of what other people in the human world are going through.
Mhm.
And she has a sort of like a hook on her finger, And
Okay.
whenever she feels really sad or whenever she feels really, just full of grief, she kind of
Mm.
tears pieces apart of herself and let her pet mouses eat it. Yeah, it's really sort of disturbing, but it's brilliantly written. So
Mm.
yeah, those are these seven endless. But the cool thing is the story that I'm going to be talking about, World's End, it has none of them in it.
Okay.
The way the whole series is structured, you kind of have, like I say, main storyline that is going on, and
Mhm.
then in some books in between, these are just short story collections
Mhm.
that are set in those worlds, but don't necessarily have those characters in it.
Mm. Okay.
The whole
Mhm.
concept of the series is the focus on dreams, like
Okay.
dreams and stories and how important they are to real life.
Mm.
So every short story kind of carries that theme in it, though that sort of plot points in it.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that is how the book goes. I mean, I can go deeper into the one that I'm reading. Sorry, I just finished reading. Should I?
Sure, please do.
Yes. So World's End, it has five short
Mhm.
stories. Okay.
Okay.
So first I have to say what World's End really is.
Yes, please.
World's End, it's a tavern, it's an inn.
Okay.
Initially, when I picked up the book, I thought this is going to be the last book of the series, like it's just going to end because it's literally called World's End. But
Okay.
well, I was proven wrong. World's End is
Oh,
just a house. It's a building. It's a pub where people go drinking and they tell stories. But
so it's
why
just a
it's
name.
called
Ah,
yeah, it's just a
okay.
name exactly. So why
Ah.
it's called World's End? It's because that place is situated uh, on the boundary of dreams and reality.
Oh, okay.
So what
Interesting.
happens? Yeah, so what happens in the book? The main character Brent, he is driving, going back to a city, going back to his home, and he's driving with a friend of his. And then suddenly something comes in his way. There's a big storm happening, like a snowstorm, and an animal walks in his way, and his car crashes. And
Oh,
he's heavily
okay.
injured. His friend is heavily injured, and it's a really big snowstorm. They're struggling to sort of walk. They're struggling to find a place for help. And
Mhm.
then what happens is that
Mhm.
he reaches this sort of warm and cozy and like a nice wooden house, and he gets inside and he sees that there
Mhm.
are a bunch of people from a bunch of different universes there,
Mhm.
and they very graciously and nicely provide him help. And that's the beauty of it. So all of the
Mhm.
people that are situated there, they are also
Mhm.
like sheltering from the storm that is happening on the outside.
Okay.
Early on in the
Mhm.
story, we are made to believe that the storm is just a normal snowstorm, like how weathers are, like it
Right.
will eventually go away, the sun will rise again.
Hmm.
But later on in the story, we are told that it is actually a reality storm.
Oh, okay.
So now
Mhm.
what a reality storm is told to us at the end of the book. But to be
Hmm.
honest, it's not really a spoiler, so I'll just say it. uh,
Sure.
So how the thing goes, usually a storm happens when like sort of like heat and wind kind of clash in between and they cannot
Hmm.
compromise a decision. So a
Hmm.
storm
Hmm.
happens. Here,
Okay.
two contrasting realities clash together, and that is how a reality storm happens.
Hmm.
So all these people from different universes are here. They are telling stories to each other. And that is how
Hmm.
Worlds and the whole collection is. That they are stories within stories.
Yes, it's fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
the the way you're explaining to and the theme of things, scheme of things also. Fantastic.
There are a bunch of stories, like five beautifully written stories. You have got
Okay.
characters who are like, centaurs, basically half men, half horses. You have
Hmm.
characters from like different universes. Like one guy is like a time traveler from the past. One person is a woman who is trying to be a pirate in a man's world. And one person is not one person, actually a school of people. They are
Hmm.
from like a different sort of universe, which is called
Hmm.
Necropolis, which is the land of the dead.
Okay.
So one of the stories that really made me believe that. Okay, so just for context, the
Hmm.
volume before this, which is called Brief Lives, the whole destruction saga.
Hmm.
Uh, I thought that this was Neil Gaiman's best work. It cannot get any better. But when I
Okay.
read the last story of Worlds and I was proven wrong, like the
Mhm.
story is about the men from Necropolis.
Okay.
These people, they kind of treat the dead. They make sure that whoever has died kind of goes along their way. They pass from the living world to the world of the dead smoothly.
Mhm.
That is the
Okay.
whole point of their occupation.
Mhm.
So one of the students from the school of theirs, he
Mhm.
recites a story in the tavern
Okay.
about how he was an apprentice to two, three more experienced sort of people.
Mhm.
Uh, in
Okay.
that whole story, there was a concept of an aerial burial. So
Okay.
what happens in it is when a person is dead, they kind of,
Mhm.
they just lie around,
Mhm.
and sort of birds or scavengers, they come in and they eat their body. It's considered like a very morally high way to go, because you are dead, but you are still sort of useful to other
Mhm.
creatures in their lives. So they
Right.
make sure that is how the person wanted to die, and then they sort of put normal food around their body, and the scavengers come, they eat the food, and they eat the
Mhm.
body as well. So how the
Mhm.
story passes is that
Mhm.
they all of these people, this apprentice and his masters, they kind of
Mhm.
have to spend the entire night until the
Mhm.
body is gone completely and the mark of the body on a mountain is also gone.
Mhm. Okay.
This process
Mhm.
usually happens throughout a night. So they just have to sit with the body, see how the body decomposes, and just pass it away. And like in these sort of burials, it isn't shown in the story, but it is told that in these sort of
Mhm.
burials, the ghost of the body also comes
Mhm.
back, sort of, like pleading, keep let me back in my life
Mhm.
here. But it does
Right.
not happen in this story, it's just mentioned. And then all of these masters, they kind of
Mhm.
tell their own stories, how they got into the business of this. And the apprentice just listens very with like complete
Mhm.
interest about it. One of them
Okay.
says his father was a hangman who used to hang people,
Right.
and one of them says he came into the city to bury his mother. So, like,
Okay.
these sort of stories, they kind of really make you question what life is, and they make
Mhm.
you question about, what sort of realities that exist beyond our own.
Mhm.
Maybe we are just,
Right.
like a small speck of living in this universe. Do our actions really matter in the whole vast grand scheme? And it
Right.
also makes you, it entertains you. Like I had no
Mhm.
idea about, like, all these type of burials actually exist. It's not just aerial burial. There are a bunch of it, and they're all sort of like briefly explained. And then I went on
Okay.
to Google to see if all of these things actually exist, and they surprisingly they do exist
Oh,
in real life.
okay.
Like many cultures have very different ways
Mhm.
of how people should be treated after they die,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's really interesting. When I see it through the lens of Neil Gaiman, the author, I probably think
Okay.
he's just, like he got to know about this somewhere, and that concept interested him so much. He just, I'm gonna, I'm gonna write a story about it.
Oh, yes.
Another
That's right.
story from the book,
Mhm.
it's
Okay.
called The Golden Boy.
Mhm.
So it's simply about this boy who is
Mhm.
very young, and he
Mhm.
becomes the president of a country. He becomes a president when he's 20. But the secret is that he makes a deal with the devil so that in exchange of his soul, he becomes the president of the country and he has full power, immense power.
Okay. Mhm.
And like he becomes so good in his regime, the
Mhm.
laws are to be changed so that he can be the president thrice.
Oh, okay.
But then the devil starts sort of, taking things too much away from him. He has a beautiful wife, a very loving wife with like two children. And then just because he doesn't fulfill a promise that he made to the devil kills his wife and his children. So he's left all alone. And then later on, he realizes that this is not worth it. This is just not worth it. So
Mhm.
he kind of retires from presidency and he lives a normal life, and he
Okay.
dies a natural death.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah. So another
Interesting. Yes.
story that I want to talk about was a
Sure.
story of a pirate. So
Mhm.
there's this lady, she's very young. She's like 21, 22.
Mhm.
She has to go from one place to another, from Bombay to London. and this is sort of set in like really old times, like 1910s, 1920s. So they
Actually.
didn't really have airplanes back then. So the only way
Hmm.
to travel from country to country was through ships.
Hmm. Right.
And she did not have any money, so she wanted to go cheaply. So she boarded a pirate ship. She
Oh, okay.
disguised herself as a guy, as a boy,
Mhm.
so that she would get sort of like an easier treatment around. And I think that that entire story speaks about feminism so well,
Mhm.
about how things have changed a lot in from like uh, olden days to where we are now as a society.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a great story. So these are like my top three stories from the whole book.
You're talking beautifully, and these are really interesting, and they have diverse subjects. That's what I liked about it. I'm sure you love these books because of the language also. So, can you quote a few lines from the book which you love the most?
Yes. So am I allowed to say any Neil Gaiman books or just World's End specifically?
Any Neil Gaiman book.
That sounds amazing. So I listed down a bunch of quotes, which I'm going to read out now.
Great.
One quote, this is not exactly from World's End, but from the Sandman series, book six,
Okay.
where one of the characters, he's explaining the importance of stories.
Hmm.
And the quote goes like, fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell
Mhm.
us that dragons can be beaten.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a great line. Another one
Amazing.
is not exactly from this series, but another book called The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman.
Hmm.
So the whole plot of The Graveyard Book is that there's a living child who just like both of his parents got killed, and now he stumbled upon a graveyard. He's a toddler where like like barely he can't even walk, and a bunch of ghosts in those graveyard, they adopted him as their own. So now
Oh,
it's a
okay.
story about a small child who is being raised by ghosts.
Hmm.
It's sort of like the Jungle Book, but in a ghostly
Hmm.
way. That is
Okay.
why it's called the Graveyard Book. There are
Right.
no real elements of horror in it. It's just really nice and wholesome. Right. So from that book,
Hmm.
there's a beautiful
Okay.
quote that I just quote right here, like right, left, and center. Quote goes like,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
like the people who believe they'll be happy if they go and live somewhere else. But who learn it doesn't work that way. Wherever you go, you take yourself with you.
Interesting. Yes,
Right?
we don't leave ourselves behind. That's right.
Exactly. We may try to, like escape from whatever is happening in our lives, but that doesn't really happen. Wherever we
No.
go, our grief is with us, our happiness, sadness, everything
Yes.
is just with us.
We want to, but we can't. We don't.
Another quote, the last quote that I
Mhm.
would like to quote is from World's End, this book.
Okay.
Um,
Mhm.
it's about the main character when he sees death
Mhm.
for the first time.
Mhm.
It's a simple line that describes her, and it goes like,
Okay. Oh.
I recognized her in the manner of one recognizing a line from a familiar book in a strange poem.
Oh, okay. Wow.
It's, it's
It's
a
very
very,
deep.
I mean, it just passed along very simply, but when you sort of dive deep into it, you realize
Mhm.
how
How deep it
great it
is.
is. And yeah, exactly.
Tanmay, in which languages do you read mostly?
I read mainly in English. Like
Mainly
since
English.
I was
Okay.
Yeah, since I was in
Uh-huh.
school, I was in an English medium school. So you
Mhm.
know how the other languages are sort of treated in that ways.
Right.
My Marathi,
Mhm.
I mean, it's good enough that I can talk in it, but my
Mhm.
reading and writing has just gone down horribly after school because
Okay.
after 10th I did not have any sort of scope of reading or writing Marathi.
Right.
Uh,
Any link to the languages, other
yeah,
languages?
other languages. I tried French for a year in 11th, but yeah, I just could not. And
Okay.
it's really tough when you already know like some languages and to learn another because as a child you don't really have a method of communication.
Mhm.
So you're kind of forced to learn a language. But now that you
Mhm.
can communicate fairly well in a way that people understand also well, uh, it's tough to adapt another sort of way of speaking into one's own dialect.
Yes. Tanmay, do you find yourself rereading the books?
I actually have not no, actually I did reread one book once, but
Okay. Mhm.
I usually don't reread books. Sometimes when I have to reference something from a book that I have, I
Mhm.
just pull it out of my shelf and show it to someone. The thing is, once I read one book, my memory, unfortunately or fortunately, is just excellent. I remember
That's
everything
great.
that happens in a book. But I
Very
haven't
nice.
yet gotten sort of like the pleasure of rereading. Many people do that, like they forget the
Mhm.
stories and they just want to reread what they've already read. They kind of
Mhm.
sort of get to live that life again.
I think so. Yeah, that's why people reread
Mm.
books.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I'm sort of, I guess, I'm sort of cursed with a great memory that I just cannot live that life again because I know what happened. The
Okay.
best part about reading a story or watching a movie or anything regarding art, you don't know what is going to happen next. That is what
Mhm.
keeps you on your toes.
Yes, that's right.
I
That's
did
right.
reread
That's
a book once because that is
Mhm.
the only, I was traveling and that is the only book that I had with. It's called Ocean
Mhm.
at the End of the Lane, again by Neil Gaiman. So
Okay.
yeah, I
Mhm.
I read that book one. I knew everything that would happen in the story, but then just read it again just for like the style of
Mhm.
writing to sort of
Mhm.
relive those scenes a bit. And yeah, it felt really nice. The book has a very sad but a content ending. And I already knew the ending, but I was kind of looking forward to it to again see, the way it turns out.
That was a great discussion, Tanmay. Thank you very much for joining and sharing your love for reading with us. Hope to see you again in a new episode with new books.
It was a pleasure being here and just talking about the things that I love, one of the most important aspects of my life. It was lovely.
You're welcome. So, see you soon again. And thank you for joining. Bye bye. Have a nice day.
Okay. You too.